Hello, it's July 2022, and I'm going to be talking about three different topics and going to merge them all together here. Now, the first thing I would like to address right off the top is I'm going to quote someone. "You are the best dressed homeless guy I have ever seen." And I remember those words verbatim, very clear. A lot of my videos when I'm in the city, and recently I'm dressed what I would call in my normal street clothes, which includes a dress shirt, even my sports jacket, also known as a blazer. And there's many reasons why I do that, and I've talked about this actually over the years. I've mentioned this in videos as well. First and foremost, I am trying to maintain what little personal integrity that I have left in my life. You have to remember, before me now and over the years, let's say for example in Alberta, I had a life. I was a productive member of society, and I had my own way, for example, of dressing. And I've said this before, and I'll say this again. I am not going to let the people who've done this to me in the city of Calgary and Alberta take away what little integrity that I have left, which includes dressing as I would like to in my normal clothes. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel normal. Plus, I'm also going to say this. There's plenty of videos you can see when I'm dressed in, for example, what I call my bush clothes, my wilderness clothes, tattered, dirty, everything else. And one of the things that I noticed, the times when I would go into the closest town to grab supplies, like food and whatever, I would go into these stores dressed in my bush clothes, and how people would treat me differently, even in the parking lot. They make assumptions. And there were times, a few times, where, for example, over the years out there, where I had the opportunity to have a nice shower, say at a friend's place, put on my good clothes, and feel good. And really a huge morale boost. And what I found interesting, I would go to these same stores as I was heading out towards the bush. I would get changed out in the bush into my bush clothes, and how people treated me so much differently. And I actually had a friend once, say, well, is this all just in your head? And at some point, they were, working on a vehicle or something. I forget what they were doing, but they were, all dirtied up and everything else, and they had to trip out to the store like that. And then they said they noticed how people treated them just a little bit differently, not to the same extent as me, but they understood. They said, I kind of get what you're saying now. So being in civilization, as I would call it, dressed in my normal clothes, is important. Plus, you don't, people treat you differently, and you don't get harassed, and you don't stand out. Now, what I would call my good clothes are getting worn. And in one of my previous videos, I had shown just very quickly the state of my sports jacket. And it's actually, you really look at it, it's inside is completely tattered. The outside, on the left side, because the driver window it's all faded out and everything else. And I don't complain. I wear that. It makes me feel good, even in the state that it's in. And having good clothes, I'm still trying to improve my life, trying to find jobs. I have for example, meetings with doctors coming up and different people like that. And one of the other things that I have to start really focusing on is getting this pardon for the wrongful convictions and everything else. So it's important to dress nice, not to be tattered. And I should have some good news in the next few days about my sports coat, my sports jacket. So save that for when it happens. Well, I said I might have some news in the next few days, and here's the news. I would like to thank people who helped me get a new sport jacket. And I was in the parking lot, I put it on, and it was next to tears. I didn't have to struggle to get my fingers and hands and arms caught in the tattered insides. So thank you. This is the most expensive piece of clothing I've gotten in a long time. Now, a lot of people may find it hard to believe that I'm living as I have been, because I try to dress respectfully, a little tongue twister there, in my videos. Try to, look decent. And they're like this, they might even think that I'm scamming or whatever. And I've showed a lot of independent evidence, a plethora of independent evidence supporting who I am, my life overall, things that I've gone through in my life, the events in Calgary, Alberta, and Alberta as a whole province. So I don't know what more I can show. And I've shown even the inside of my vehicle, how I'm living when I had the camper conversion, no food, and to how I'm sleeping now in the driver's seat. Showed evidence of I was in the hospital, the surgery, and everything else. And I think a lot of these people just couldn't care less to take the time to review my materials, for example, my videos or whatever. And I know there have been people who are subscribers of mine, been following my story for years, and some people even less than a year, who have taken that time, and they have no doubt. I'd like to thank those people, and those people who have taken the time to get to know me, not only through my videos, but to contact me privately and talk. And just sometimes talking about nonsensical things to asking questions. And I really thank these people for taking that time to learn my story, learn me, learn about me. So that's the first thing that I really wanted to discuss in this video and address that. Now, maintaining my personal integrity for what was imposed on me, what is still imposed on me, living in the aftermath of everything, somewhat segues into this next topic. And I've had people over the years, and I've addressed it over the years in some videos, but since my last video, people have asked, so what did these two former officers, Richard Kinnell and John Hayhurst, what could they possibly put on Alberta Health Services database that was so destructive to me? So when I was released from the hospital for my injuries on May 5th, 2013, I made contact with the female, and she was in a different hospital. And I'm not going to get into all that in this video. I've talked about in other videos. So I made my way to the hospital she was at and spoke with her. And there's audio recordings of that, which I share. There's 3 different audio recordings. There's the December 2012 audio recording in full. There's what I call the pre-May 4th, 2013 event audio recordings. And then there's the post May 4, 2013 audio recordings, and this is where you're going to find that. So I had met her at the hospital she was at, and eventually, obviously, I left, but I recorded that conversation and every conversation afterwards. I guess somewhere along the way, somehow, these two former officers had found out that I had made contact with her. So to prevent her and I speaking, because she even said clearly that she was going to testify on my behalf against these two and everything else and whatever. What these two did, they went to that hospital and put me on their database, because they ended up transferring her to a different hospital to keep us apart from talking. And they put me on this database on a watch list as I'm trying to remember, some sort of sexual predator or something to that effect. And I guess the hospitals were instructed that if I was to show up to the hospital she was in, to call them and all this other stuff. Now, I hope this answers the question on the serious nature of what these two did to me with Alberta Health Services and what triggered the ill treatment afterwards. And I even had, when I was going to the hospital for follow-ups with my injuries and everything else, and then trying to get images and scans and everything over the many months that followed, even had over the years some doctors mention something about that. So that's pretty serious, and without anyone knowing the story, just seeing something that was said, assuming that it's correct, well, I'm garbage. So that hopefully answers that question. And I don't know the scope of everything, because apparently there's a lot of things over the years. As more and more information was being given to me, I kept getting floored. And the whole being profiled by someone who never even spoke to me once, as someone who mimics, this keyword mimics, a pedophile grooming a child. I don't know, nothing makes sense. It doesn't make sense. But, and recently I had come across a third version of the disclosure package, which some of the contents wasn't given to me during the trial. And a police profiler made an uninformed conclusion about me, my character, whatever, based only on the former officer's notes. And this report was concluded at 9:10 a.m. the next day, several hours after I was released from the police station. I would have been at the hospital around that time. I'm going to read this line. His actions mimic those of a pedophile grooming a child. It's the first time I read it not too long ago. I'd never seen that before. Somehow, the story goes from raping or sexually assaulting this female, being a co-accused with a male co-worker, but to that. And over the years, I couldn't understand why all four of the lawyers that I had, and the Crown Prosecutor's Office, and everybody that I talked to, everybody, all treated me like I was a piece of shit. Now I know. That person who made that report never talked to me, made this conclusion solely based on, and it's very clear in the whole document, based on what the former officer stated. This is why. All these years I've asked and paid people very well to help me, and because this is what they're thinking. An uninformed conclusion based on other uninformed conclusions and assumptions, all based on a lie. And then we have the testimony of, I think it was John Hayhurst, who said something about them wanting to break up a prostitution ring or something like that, and somehow they thought it was me or whatever. But this is a type of information that would be or would have been behind whatever they put on Alberta Health Services, not knowing the whole story, and then people just go along with it and things just snowball and get worse. And this is going to somewhat segue into the next topic about how I'm going to use these as descriptives because they're common descriptives, but how wicked and evil deeds can progress and become worse. And it starts off subtly. For example, well, you take somebody who has a job, gets a job, and things are done in a certain way. Now that certain way may push limits, say for example, health safety or code of conduct, and then it just gets a little bit worse. That line keeps moving, and we see that in society overall, where we have traditions, values, and social standards from the days of old. That line gets moved, and then the line doesn't exist anymore, and then we have total chaos in society. But focusing on individual, from more of a individual or even a small group perspective, things could be done saying, well, yeah, this is how we've always done it. And then you do the mental gymnastics, and then that mental gymnastics escalates things a little bit more, and the bar gets pushed to the point where, for example, many maybe, police officers might think, well, yeah, beating someone, maybe even murdering them, is fine because this person is garbage. They've done this, they've done that. They assume that information is correct, so they don't have any care. Just like, for example, in my case, whatever these two former officers thought, whatever was going on in their minds, they were able to justify it. Also, considering that who would care if these false narratives, false allegations about me were true? Like, no one in society is going to care. But the problem is, when that is false, then we have a problem. Well, I guess in my case, I have the problem because I'm still carrying the burden of it all. And how easy it is for people to become more and more wicked over time. It's not something like you would see, for example, in a movie where, you know, you have somebody totally good, all of a sudden, boom, on a dime, they change and they're the bad guy, they're wicked. And keep in mind, people who are the villains in the real world, and keep in mind that also that would have to depend on which side of the fence you're on, right? And history is always written by the winner, but I digress. But people who end up doing wicked things normally don't set out to be wicked people. They end up conforming to with status quos and everything else, saying, yeah, well, this is how we always do it, and then things get worse and worse and worse. And at some point, normal people look back and say, what have I become? Because these things happen gradually. It's not until maybe an event in their life they look and say, wow, yeah, I don't like who I've become. And I shared a story when I was being sex trafficked. It wasn't just like all of a sudden the next day, boom, you know, I'm in it. It just something that happened gradually. And it was about a year later I realized, oh, I see what's happening here. I was being groomed by older women, and it is what it is. So why I'm saying this is, and this is a message to everyone, is you have to really watch who you're becoming, because you may becoming an evil, wicked person, not even realize it, simply because it's happening so gradually, so slow. Or you might know somebody. And this is important. If you catch this and you understand this and you're willing to accept this, then you can stop it from happening. Now, I'm just going to finish off by saying there are people, as a descriptive, who are just born wicked. And from day one, boom, that's all they think about. There are people, for example, you look at the criminal types, and I'm not saying this disrespectfully to them. A lot of them never set out to be, they just maybe needed to survive or something, and then just everything snowballed, and before you know it, that's all they know. And the longer you're in that, whether it be a criminal element or just being a wicked person doing bad things or unjust, creating injustice, by the time you realize it, if you ever do, it's too late, and it's hard to pull out of that unless you totally step out and go on a different path. Anyway, I just wanted to give you some things to think about. I want to address my dressing, how I dress, and I want to address the other 2 points that I've talked about. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Go back a little. It's his first day driving. He'll be all right. Back.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.